What's up, everybody? Happy Labor Day weekend to you. If you're like me, you've been outside a little bit lately, and when you look around, you may notice, man, my lawn is not looking good right now, and you're wondering, what can I do? What are those first steps I can take to get my lawn looking good again? As I mentioned in last week's video, we just got through a really hot stretch where it was a total drought and we haven't had any rain in a long time. So the grass is looking really dry unless you irrigate. And even if you do have an irrigation system, there's a chance that you have some kind of fungus or some different type of mildew issues that may be going on in your grass because maybe you overwatered it. So right now is a great time to get your lawn back on track. So these are some tips and tricks that you can use to get your lawn headed in the right direction. So if you've identified that your lawn maybe is just dormant and you don't have many weeds, then if you just wait, put down some fertilizer if you need it, and wait for those temperatures to cool down a little bit and for you to get a little bit more rain, your grass is gonna bounce back. Just because it's brown right now doesn't mean it's dead. Grass goes dormant and turns brown to protect itself. That way, when it gets those ideal growing conditions again, it's gonna start thriving. And we're coming into that season right now where the temperatures come down, the amount of rainfall that we get goes up, and the grass really loves that. So you may not need to do too much to get your lawn back on track. If you've noticed that your lawn is full of weeds, it's important to identify what type of weeds you have, and they basically break down to two different types. So there are broadleaf weeds. That's an example would be dandelions. That's a broadleaf weed, and that's a perennial weed. So if those roots stay in the ground and we go into wintertime, once things warm up again, those weeds are still gonna be there. So you're gonna have to deal with them in the spring. Another type of weed is what's called a grassy weed. And a grassy weed is something like crabgrass. And those are what are called annual weeds. So when we get our frost and it starts to get cold out, those weeds are gonna die. They've already dropped their seeds for next year for the plants that they're gonna make for next year. So for those, you may not need to do anything to kill them off because nature is gonna make sure that that happens. And what you would want to do is make sure that next spring you put something down to keep those seeds that they've already dropped from germinating and becoming new plants. So if you have weeds and maybe you have some bare spots in your lawn and you want to seed, you're probably thinking, all right, do I kill the weeds? Do I put grass seed down and then spray down weed killer? Do I put down weed and feed and then try to seed with that? Or what do I do? And it's very confusing, but I'm going to try to simplify that for you right now. If you have an existing lawn that's pretty thick with a lot of good grass and you just have some weeds, then overseeding in the fall may not be necessary. What you could do is just spray the weed killer, so like an Ortho Weed B Gon or any kind of selective herbicide is gonna get the job done for you. And now is a good time to do that because the temperatures are okay. It's gonna choke those weeds out. And if you have something like Kentucky bluegrass, that's a spreading grass. So in the next month or month and a half, that Kentucky bluegrass is gonna spread into those areas that used to be filled with weeds if you kill those weeds off. If you just have some weeds in your yard, another option would be just to manually pull those out. And I've shown you in some of my videos previously, I have a stand-up weed puller that I really like. It works extremely well. And I also have a handheld one for smaller weeds. That way you don't make such a big hole in the ground when you do that. Those things work extremely well. So if you have good turf, you just have some weeds that have crept in, you can easily go around, take a little bit of time and pull those things out, but make sure you get all the roots. If you leave even just a little bit of that root, it's gonna grow back. If you have a lot of crabgrass in your lawn and maybe you don't have a very thick turf base already, my recommendation would be hold off on the weed killer and try to build up the strength of your turf by overseeding and fertilizing. Now, that crabgrass is not gonna go away right now, but once it gets cold outside, that crabgrass is gonna die and it's not gonna come back until next spring. But you can prevent that next spring. So I would go through, check everything out. I would dethatch. If you have these things available to you, depending on the money you wanna spend, I would do core aeration. That's gonna break up the soil a little bit and it's gonna poke holes in the ground that's gonna allow water, nutrients, and those seeds, if you're overseeding, to get down into the dirt to make good seed to soil contact if you're trying to grow new grass. When you're selecting the grass seed that you want, it's important to take a look at the packaging. And just like nutrition facts on the foods that we eat, every grass seed is gonna have the packaging that's gonna show you what exactly is in that grass seed. And typically the cheaper the grass seed you buy, the more annual ryegrass is gonna be in that, and that's gonna come up and look good right away. But again, it's an annual, so it's gonna die off and it's not gonna come back. You wanna make sure you have some good perennials and take a look at the germination rate. The higher the germination rate, that's the number on the right side, the more grass you're gonna get. So if you spend a little bit more money, you're gonna see the benefit of that. If you've chosen that you're gonna overseed, what type of grass do I use? I don't really know. I get that question all the time from friends. What do you recommend on grass? And if you have cool season grass like me, there's 3 main types of grass that you're gonna choose from. One would be Kentucky bluegrass. It works really well. It spreads, it's self-healing. So if somebody takes a chunk out of it, it's gonna shoot some underneath rhizomes that are gonna come up and produce new plants in that spot, and it's gonna grow and fill in on its own. Kentucky bluegrass is one of my favorite grasses. The downside is it takes a long time for that seed to germinate. So it can take up to a month before you start seeing seed come up if you plant Kentucky bluegrass. The next really popular cool season grass that you could choose would be perennial ryegrass. And perennial ryegrass is one of my favorite grasses to use, one, because it germinates really quickly. If you plant perennial ryegrass and you keep it watered and you do things the right way, you're gonna see those little sprouts coming up in just a few days. And it fills in quickly, it's thick, it looks really nice. I love perennial ryegrass. The downside of perennial ryegrass is if you get really cold winters or incredibly hot summers, it's difficult for it to survive in those conditions. So that would be the downside. The upside is it's beautiful. It comes in nice and thick. It does not spread like Kentucky bluegrass, so it's not gonna spread on its own, but you'll see that it germinates quickly and it's a really nice grass. The third type of common cool season grass that you're gonna see is tall fescue. And tall fescue grass, again, in the name it says tall because it ideally is grown tall. You don't want to cut it short. You want to have it at least 3 inches or taller if you're going to maintain that. If you have an all Kentucky bluegrass lawn, if you put tall fescue in there, it might throw off the uniformity of the look of your grass because tall fescue has a wider blade. It looks a little bit different than Kentucky bluegrass and perennial rye that look pretty similar to each other. However, tall fescue is very drought tolerant. If you go through a total drought and your Kentucky bluegrass or perennial rye goes dormant, your tall fescue is probably not. And you'll see patches of darker green grass with wider blades. That's the tall fescue that you have in your yard. Now, I'm not a huge fan of tall fescue. However, it does grow really well in shade and some people love it. If you have all tall fescue and you like your grass nice and long, then go for it. A common mistake that people make in the fall is they go to Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever and they're like, all right, I'm gonna kill the weeds and I also want to get grass seed and I'm gonna do both of those things together. You have to understand that weed killers or weed preventers are also gonna prevent good grass, like grass seed that you're putting down. It's gonna keep that from growing. So either don't put down a weed killer and try to overseed with new grass seed, or buy the weed killer, the weed and feed, or you can spray Ortho Weed B Gone or any kind of selective herbicide to try to kill your weeds, but don't do both. Because if you put that down, it's gonna kill your good grass seed and then you just threw money right in the garbage. If you have a pretty bad weed problem, but you also have thin turf, another option, if you don't mind spending a little bit more money, is using what's called tenacity. And tenacity is gonna kill those weeds in your lawn, but it's gonna allow you to put down new grass seed without blocking that out. Now, it works differently than the other herbicides that you might use, like Ortho Weed B Gone. If you spray Ortho Weed B Gone, it's recommended you wait at least a month until you put down seed after that. With tenacity, you can spray and that same day you can put down new grass seed. The drawback to that is tenacity is a bit expensive. It's about $65 for a bottle of that, which honestly, I've never used tenacity personally. I've gone through and pulled all my weeds over the years by hand, and I've kind of taken care of the weed issues that way. And as they pop up, I walk around the lawn, I analyze what's going on, and I pop them up by hand. That's time consuming, it's tedious, and there's no perfect plan. The more work that you do, the less you're gonna end up spending. The less work you do, the more you're gonna have to end up spending on things like tenacity if you wanna have a really nice looking lawn. So just to review, because this is confusing and I get that. Step number 1, analyze what are the issues that you're having. Is it just dormant, or do you need to fill in some new grass because you have some bare spots? Next is choose. Am I gonna kill weeds, or am I gonna try to grow new grass? Because it's difficult to do both. If you wanna do both, choose tenacity to kill those weeds so you can also seed at the same time, because we're running out of time to put that grass seed down for it to build up its strength before we go into winter time. Next, put down the product. Select the good grass seed that you would like based off the conditions that you have. or choose the weed killer that you want to use based off the issues that you have, whether it be broadleaf weeds or grassy weeds. After that, it's important to be patient. This stuff does not happen overnight. It takes a lot of work to have a really nice lawn, but once you do, it is so much fun. It's really enjoyable, and your family is going to enjoy it. The kids will love playing in the grass, and even if you don't have kids, you'll be the most proud person on the block when people walk by and see your beautiful green lawn. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, put it in the comments, or you can hit me up on Instagram at Lake House Lawn Care.